Spell cards are a large part of Touhou's identity, focusing more so on presentation rather than being practical. Pretty much every named character in the series has at least one spell card they can use, and quite a number of them have well over 10. What I'm trying to say is, there's a very large amount of different patterns within Touhou games, so much so that I haven't even experienced every one of them yet myself. However, I have had my fair share of the majority of them, and it got me thinking about which spell cards I really enjoyed, and which ones I really did not. That's why today, I wanted to go through all the mainline Windows Touhou games, and talk about my favorite and least favorite spell card from each of them, while also explaining what it is about them that I like, or dislike so much about. Starting off is the embodiment of Scarlet Devil, my favorite spell card being Remilia Scarlet's Scarlet Meister. I like a majority of the patterns in this game, simply because so many of them rely heavily on reflex. It's a great game for a guerrilla gamer such as I. Among all of the patterns like this, none quite stick out to me quite like Scarlet Meister. This spell card is raw. It's fast, and really tests your strength in the aspects that I find the most enjoyable in Touhou. Now, I actually have an astronomically low clear rate on it. I'm talking literally 1 out of 99 plus. But it's not about how good I am at it, and more so how much I enjoy trying and watching others do it. I have never seen a capture of this spell card that wasn't exciting, and I'm always excited to try it myself when I get to it on a run. Basically, the spell card encompasses everything I like about Touhou games. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Izayoi Sakuya's Killing Doll. Now I'm sure you could argue that some of what I said earlier can apply to this one, but there's a very clear difference between them, that being the bullet type. I hate knives, especially the ones in the older games. They have awkward hitboxes, and I'm never sure where exactly on the knife it is. I also hate dodging bullets that come at a diagonal. Killing Doll is both of these things, just a mess of knives that even when I feel like I see a way through it, I explode anyways. Now, like Meister, this is another spell card that is very impressive to watch a capture for, but my bias towards knives makes me hate trying it myself, and so I view it as the worst spell card in the game. Next up is Perfect Cherry Blossom, my favorite spell card being Saiyoji Yuyuko's Horikawa Butterfly. I like this spell card for a pretty simple reason: grazing. I am far from a score runner, but even I can experience the feeling of the graze number skyrocketing from this pattern. I really enjoy watching this spell card in score runs too, as the graze gained from this spell card is often so juicy that the capture bonus cannot properly show how much is worth upon completion. I wonder if going for a high graze on this particular spell card has ever been the cause of someone getting into score running as a whole, as at least in my case, it made grazing feel really enjoyable, which is why even if I don't have much to comment on about its visuals or difficulty, it makes it my favorite spell card in the game. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Konpaku Yomu's Hell God Sword. I don't think this one will come as much of a surprise, but I gotta admit, I was a bit torn between this and Hungry King's Sword. Ultimately, I went with HGS here because it's more or less the same as HKS, but with more bullets to dodge. So what exactly do I have against this one? Well, it actually has more to do with Yomu's gimmick rather than the pattern itself. Yomu has some weird bullet time effect to most of her spell cards. Everything slows down and then resumes to normal speed. I feel that the density of the pattern here is supposed to take this slowdown into account, and you're intended to navigate it before it runs out. However, I find the randomness of the pattern doesn't work that well with this idea. I also don't like the gimmick in general, it just feels awkward to me. My experience with the spell card usually goes as such: getting midway into a small gap, and then having the speed resume, which causes me to run into a nearby bullet. A frustrating experience that I'm never excited to be a part of. Next up is Imperishable Knight, my favorite spell card being Kirisame Marisa's Master Spark. Now I know this one feels like a bit of a cop-out, but let me explain. Master Spark has been Marisa's spell card since EOSD, but it was used from the perspective of the player. Come Touhou 8, we finally get to see what Master Spark looks like as a boss pattern, and it's great to see that for the most part, it really is just a big ass laser. Master Spark is arguably Touhou's most recognizable spell card. It's so iconic that I can't help but smile whenever it comes up, so it's not surprising to me that I consider it my favorite from this game. If you're unsatisfied with that answer though, then I'll at least say that a close runner-up was Inabate's last word, Ancient Duper, as I like its high speed and tricky nature. Two aspects that complement Tei's character immensely. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Mystia Lorelei's Song of the Night Sparrow. So remember what I said at the beginning about spell cards being more so about presentation rather than their practicality? Well, here we have a spell card that ignores that in favor of reducing your vision to only a small area around the player. The field of view is worse depending on the difficulty, and the biggest issue, as you can see, or more accurately cannot see, is that there's no pattern to look at here. The result is a rather simple attack happening in the dark. I'm not a fan of Mystia's gimmick at all, as it goes against the main point of spell cards. I know her final spell and last word are significantly worse in both visibility and difficulty, but since these patterns are technically optional, I don't consider them to be worse than this one. At least it's all over by the end of stage 2, but it really is unfortunate that this is how Mystia's ability translated into a spell card. Next up is Mountain of Faith, my favorite spell card being Kochiya Sanae's Summon Takeminikara. I actually had to think about this one a lot, as there were a few different ones I thought were neat, but had issues with. Peerless Wind God has elements that I enjoy, but I despise timeouts. Moses Miracle is really cool visually, but I really wish Sanae didn't move. Now the thing about this pick is it doesn't have very much to do with the spell card itself, and more so just how I feel when dealing with it. It's a pattern that visually is overwhelming. However, the method of capturing it really highlights just how much of it is for flair. It's a spell card that makes me think about when I was first getting into Touhou, and how so many patterns were incredibly intimidating to me, even on normal. But now there are patterns on Lunatic that I can look at with a decent amount of confidence. So yeah, this pattern just invokes a weird sense of nostalgia. It makes me think about just how much I've improved as a player since I started. Though this could have applied to many different spell cards, which honestly makes me wonder if I even like any spell card from Mountain of Fate to begin with. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Kawashiro Nitori's Spin the Cephalic Plate. I bet you're surprised I didn't say one of those Kaneko spells that has incorrect hitboxes. And yeah, those are objectively worse for the sole reason that they have incorrect hitboxes. However, this one is personal. This is the spell card I practiced the most when I was trying to 1cc Lunatic, and my capture rate was abysmal. I was told the best way to do it was to manipulate Nitori's movement towards the right, then stream to the left and hope she goes down before I have to restream. What actually happened was Nitori went whatever direction she wanted, and anytime she did go the right way, it didn't feel like it was because of me. I didn't like this spell card at all before practicing it, and I ended up accepting that it was going to be nothing more than a bomb toll. The only thing I really got out of this practice session is a hatred for any pattern that requires me to manipulate the boss's movement. Next up is Subterranean Animism, my favorite spell card being Komeiji Koishi's Yokai Polygraph. Wait, this is a timeout spell. Didn't I just say I hate those? Well, yes, but let me explain. The biggest issue I take with timeout spells is that they often overstay their welcome, and the pattern doesn't really start until the last 15 or so seconds anyways. What I like about Yokai Polygraph is that while yes, it is just the same thing getting faster over the course of 30 seconds, it's one of the coolest ideas for a spell card I've ever seen. The lasers produce bullets that don't move, but mimic your position. And the ideal method of capturing the spell card is to make sudden large movements to open gaps in the bullets as you spin around Koishi. You're basically imitating a polygraph test. Koishi's spell cards in general are pretty cool, and are all themed around psychology. She's probably got my favorite set of any extra boss, though this much is obvious since I consider my favorite spell card in SA to be one of her timeouts, of all things. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Komeiji Koishi's Super Ego. Well, this kinda goes against what I just said, but there's a really good reason for it. Let me take you back to when I was trying to get my SA extra stage clear, before I used any practice mod. I had seen Release of the Id, and thought it wasn't too bad, though I did not, and still don't, really understand heart hitboxes. Then the next spell card comes up, and it's essentially just the last one, but in reverse. It went pretty well, and the following attempts weren't too bad either, and I ended up building some confidence in my ability to clear the pattern. And then I had an attempt that was just utterly horrifying. I lost 3 lives during it, and it completely crushed my confidence in the spell card. Every attempt following was full of panic, uncertainty, and bombs. Good God, it didn't take much to scare me into a bomb. So yeah, I got ego checked by Super Ego, and even after finally beating Koishi, I never truly got over the damage that spell card did. Before I move on to the next game though, I really wanted to give an honorable mention here to Oren's Needles of Yore and the Vengeful Spirits in Pain, aka Ghost Wheels. This is the worst spell card in the entire world, and if it wasn't for my personal trauma with Super Ego, this section would have been full of unapologetic hate towards it, something perfectly in theme to the game it comes from. Next up is Undefined Fantastic Object, my favorite spell card being Hojo Nue's Danmaku Chimera. Now you might call me boring for this one, and that's okay. I don't actually have much to say about this one though, I just think it looks cool, and I like the way it shifts between lasers and bullets. The method of capture isn't anything ridiculous, and honestly it's a bit repetitive, but I just think it's neat. So there's a possibility my strong hatred for the main game doesn't let me view any of those spell cards in a positive light. so it's entirely possible my decision simply came down to which spell card not a part of the main game I had a decent clear rate on. But that's kinda sad, so let's just leave it at cool Nue lasers. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Tatara Kogasa's Karakasa Surprising Flash. I hate almost every spell card in this game for reasons often beyond the spell cards themselves. However, this spell card is one that I couldn't pin my general dislike of the game on as the reason for thinking it's absolutely terrible. I actually think all of Kogasa's extra stage spell cards suck, but the last one really takes it. It's about 25 seconds long, and all it is a wheel of lasers that stops and activates, and it gets faster as it goes. That's the whole spell card, a constant wave of think fast lasers. I have nothing constructive to say, and I don't want to spend much longer on this game in general. So I'll leave it at saying that the only thing surprising about this spell card is that it was considered good enough to release with. Next up is 10 Desires, my favorite spell card being Kasodani Kyouko's Charged Yahoo. I've always been a fan of Kyoko's gimmick in the games. She creates walls and bubbles that contain or keep out bullets. It's a very unique ability. Charged Yahoo stands out to me the most though. It starts out as a massive bubble and shrinks until it eventually releases the bullets, though the next bubble that comes can catch some of the leaving bullets and pull them back in. So if you're not careful, you could get shot in the back. The gimmick of the spell card is pretty cool. Also, I really like its name. I don't particularly love doing the spell card, but the other aspects I do like about it simply outweigh that. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Miyako Yoshika's Score Desire Eater. Another one of those spell cards that isn't surprising to see here, and odds are you already know exactly what it is I'm going to say, but here we go anyways. Yoshika's gimmick is that she can heal by absorbing the spirits around her. So what you're supposed to do in this spell card is approach her and snatch the spirits yourself before she eats them. But, well, that's easier said than done. It is way safer to just time out the spell card than actually try to capture it. So it effectively turns Yoshika's final into a 45-second timeout. Now granted, if you want to capture the thing, you're free to try. But I think it's pretty abysmal design that the optimal option is to simply not engage. Hell, even if you are actively shooting, you simply cannot do enough damage in the given time to capture it. But even if you were given that time, it would mean the spell card would take even longer to sit through. Thankfully, no one in Touhou ever uses a heal gimmick ever again, and it makes me wonder if any shmup has ever succeeded, or let alone even tried, a healing boss before. Regardless of that though, it's pretty clear that at least in Touhou, it failed miserably. Next up is Double Dealing Character, my favorite spell card being Sekibanki's Multiplicative Head. I like this spell card as it shows off a big part of Sekibanki's ability, her multiple heads. And the amount of heads in the spell card goes up the higher the difficulty. Now the ugly truth. This spell card did not come to mind instantly for me. In fact, nothing positive came to mind at all. Seems that the only thing I remember about DDC is the gimmicks that drive me up the wall. I honestly thought about leaving this favorite part empty as a result, but it didn't feel right. Here I was worried if I actually liked Mountain of Faith. At least something came to mind for that one. Though this isn't the first time DDC has just completely slipped my mind, and it won't be the last. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Horikawa Raiko's Land Percuss. This is Raiko's fourth spell card. She fires a wave of bullets, then violently shakes the screen, which moves the bullets around and creates gaps through them. This spell card gives me a headache, and it hurts my eyes. The whole pattern is just this too. This was actually considered good enough for an extra stage boss. Single waves and screen shaking. An extremely mind-boggling spell card in more ways than one. Now I know what you're thinking. It doesn't look that bad. And you know what? It really doesn't. But you gotta trust me when I say it is way worse when you're the one playing. Now if you told me you thought Seija was worse, I would understand. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the worst assault on the senses Touhou has ever done. Next up is Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom. My favorite spell card being Junko's Lilies of Murderous Intent. I'm actually not a fan of most of Junko's patterns, as her whole purity gimmick makes for some really simple designs. It's a similar issue that I take with Mystia. Lily's is also relatively simple, but there's something about it that stands out to me. There's beauty in its simplicity. Well, really, I just like the way the lasers shoot out. Maybe my reasoning is the only simple thing here. Law-K utilizes a number of neat ideas for its patterns that I like, but somehow one of Junko sticks out the most to me. And that's gonna make the next section a little awkward. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Junko. Yeah, that's right, just Junko. I do not like her gimmick in the slightest, and the only reason it's even acceptable in the first place is because Law-K's main gimmick is point device mode. You're expected to bang your head against the wall until it gives way, and it's fine because you can restart quickly. Well, that's all well and good, but there's no point device mode for the extra stage. Why does that matter? Because for whatever reason, Junko comes back during the boss fight a few times, and does the same thing she was doing in the main game. This right here is the worst spell card in the game, Junko's pristine Danmaku for killing a person. And it does just that. 12 minutes into the extra stage, and you are faced with another round of micro-dodging, no checkpoints, and the inability to do damage with a bomb. Even if you disregard all of that as a skill issue, you cannot deny this spell card is extremely boring. The final spell card of the extra stage is pretty much just as boring, and arguably the lamest final spell of any boss in the series. It's all caused by Junko and her basic bitch bullets. Junko should not have been a part of this boss fight, and all of her contributions to it do nothing but prove that. That's why I said Junko in general, because honestly, they all suck pretty equally. Next up is Hidden Star in 4 Seasons. My favorite spell card being Matara Okina's Scorched Earth of Abnormal Intense Heat. This is going to be another one of those quick ones, as the main reason for this one is, again, less to do with the spell card itself. This game's gimmick lets you put up a bullet dissolving barrier, and it invalidates the spell card. Also, using this gimmick doesn't cost you the capture bonus. In other words, I have no idea how to do this spell card, but if I just stay around where the bullets converge, I can just erase them and get a successful capture. That's it really. This is just the main spell card that comes to mind when I think of ways to use the season release. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Main Satono's Frenzied Tengu Frightening. Understand how badly I wanted to leave it at just Main Satono, but I can't pull the same card twice. I hate duo bosses, and I despise every aspect about these two in general. Frenzied Tengu Frightening is just the one I hate the most. I hate their bullets, I hate their lasers, and it all comes at an angle that I hate. I have such a hatred toward these two that it destroyed my desire to play this game, knowing that no matter what I choose to play, they're going to show up. Petty? Maybe, but everyone has their least favorite boss. This is just mine. Next up is Wily Beast and Weakest Creature. My favorite spell card being Kisho Yashie's Dragon Crest Bullets. Another one of those spell cards that I just think is really cool in how it works. The rings are consistent and expand and shrink. It can certainly be difficult to pinpoint the safe spots, but well, I like it more for its visual flair, rather than its difficulty anyways. That was pretty short, so here's an honorable mention, that being Kurokomasaki's Follow Me Unafraid. This one is less visually impressive, and more so just very unique in how it works. Unfortunately, I value Yashie's presentation a little more than Saki's uniqueness. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Haniya Sushin Keiki's Idola Diabolus. Keiki's fight is really cool in how it's done. The player retreats as it goes, and by the end, backup arrives. Idola Diabolus is Keiki's final spell card, and honestly, it's just a mess of colored kunai. The rest of Keiki's patterns are centered around shapes and sculptures, and love them or hate them, they fit her very well. I don't really see what her final has to do with any of that myself, but even if there is an explanation, the spell card itself is still pretty unfortunate. Thematically, the animal spirits flooding the screen is good, but, well, it doesn't really translate well into the gameplay. Basically, I think the spell card falls short in a lot of areas, and makes it a pretty weak final to the game as a whole. Last up is Unconnected Marketeers, my favorite spell card being Tenkyuu Chimata's Asylum of Danmaku, the final game, and the final spell card. I like the spell card simply for the way it works. The bullets close in and turn into knives, and I don't mind them as much in this game. To be honest, I have very little playtime in this one, so I really don't have much to say about any of the spell cards here. This is just the one I thought was the coolest, that belonged to my favorite character from it. A bit anticlimactic, but it is what it is. Now we have my least favorite spell card, that being Yamashiro Takane's Green Cyclone. Now we're talking anticlimactic. Simply put, I cannot process how these bullets move at all, and it causes me to panic, so there is always a bomb, and it sucks. You may also notice that this isn't even the lunatic version, and I promise you, I have had just as much trouble with the normal one too. It all looped back to difficulty in the end, but I guess that's not too surprising, since it's a pretty unavoidable factor. And that concludes my list of favorite and least favorite spell cards throughout the mainline Touhou games. There were definitely a few I had to think about, but the majority of them I knew exactly what it was and why, although it's surprisingly hard to put your thoughts onto paper in a way that makes sense. It should go without saying, but these are all strictly my opinion, and my reasoning mostly comes from factors outside of difficulty, as I'm pretty casual overall. But enough about me. What about you? What are some of your favorite and least favorite spell cards within Touhou, and why? It could be for any reason. Personal difficulty, love of the pattern, hate of the character. It doesn't need to be the greatest reason, but I'm sure you have one for at least one spell card. Feel free to share in the comments, or don't. Up to you, really. If anything, I hope this at least gets you thinking about this topic for yourself. I still have a number of lunatic modes to go through, which means I'll be experiencing more spell cards down the line. And who knows, maybe some of my opinions will change. But for now, I'm just gonna accept all of them as they are, regardless of any skill issue comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.